If you are a photographer who mostly or exclusively works with prime Canon lenses, having an extender can open up the amount of focal lengths at your disposal. For example, in the field of architecture photography, it's fairly common for photographers to work with tilt-shift lenses. They may have a 17, 24, and 50, but if they had a 1.4 extender like this one, well, now they can also shoot at focal lengths around 35 and 70. So why don't more photographers use extenders? Why are some hesitant to make the purchase? Because apparently these things are not perfect. And if you've heard feedback and rumors from other photographers like I have, you'll come across 3 common complaints against these things. Number 1, they make your image darker, and more specifically, this 1.4 extender takes away about 1 whole stop of light. Complaint number 2 is they can add some chromatic aberration. And complaint number 3 is they soften the image overall. Things just don't look quite as sharp. Now, seeing as how I'm an architecture and design photographer, and I think a lot of my subscribers are as well, I can honestly say that I just do not care much at all about complaint number 1. My camera is on a tripod most of the time, so if I lose an entire stop of light by slapping this thing on the camera body, I would just slow down the shutter speed a few clicks to let more light in and problem solved. The other 2 issues were things I was a little worried about when it came to this lens extender. So for the sake of this video, I went out, I purchased one, and took a few shots with it to see for myself how bad this thing really is. Now, another thing I'm not as worried about as I have been in the past is identity theft. And that is all thanks to the sponsor of this video, who provides a service I've already been using for over 2 years, Aura. Seriously, do a Google search on your name or email address and you may be surprised as to what all comes up. I tried a search on myself and not much did, which isn't a surprise because I've already been using Aura. Data brokers are out there trying to sell our information to scammers, spammers, or anyone else looking to target you and me. Aura shows me which data brokers are selling my information and automatically submits opt-out requests on my behalf. This is especially important in light of the recent AT&T data breach, where over 73 million customer records, both existing and former customers, were just released on the dark web. They recommended those that were affected use strong passwords, monitor account activity, and consider credit freezes or fraud alerts from credit bureaus. Well, Aura does all this for me. And best of all, I don't have to download several different apps just because a company could not keep my data secure. If my info was compromised in the AT&T data breach, I really wouldn't worry because Aura is always on and always doing the hard work of keeping me safe. To give Aura a try, head over to aura.com/Matthew Anderson to start your 2-week free trial, or simply click the link in the description. So we'll bring in the laptop. I decided to use a classic 1-point perspective shot of this kitchen as the test subject. I really did want to keep this video authentic, so this is the first time I ever took this extender out of the box and used it. And this is the first time, as I'm sitting here recording this, that I'm going to be viewing the image files. And for those of you who follow me on Instagram, I know I posted way back in November that I purchased this thing and I was going to make a YouTube video about it. So I apologize it's taken me so long. For those of you interested in the technicalities, the tripod and the camera never moved. I photographed everything on this camera, which is a Sony a7 III with a Metabones adapter. And I know there's people who are going to ask in the comments. No, in my experience, the Metabones adapter has absolutely no effect on the image quality. So to keep things simple, I'm going to break this down into 3 comparisons. The first one is pretty self-explanatory. I'm going to compare the image taken with the 24mm tilt shift to the same shot taken with the extender. This, what you're looking at right now, is a straight at-a-camera shot at 24mm f10 and at ISO 100 on this Sony camera. Taking a quick peek, zooming in here. I mean, yeah, this thing is pretty darn sharp. So straight out of camera, again, nothing's been adjusted. Things look pretty good. So this is 24mm. We'll go back to regular shot. So now we jump over to the very first shot where I threw on the extender, and yes, pretty obvious. Complaint number 1, it's significantly darker. But again, like I mentioned, not much of a concern. So all I had to do was slow the shutter speed down, whereas the original one, let's see what we were at 3.2 seconds, and this one was at 6. So what we're gonna do is compare these two. So I threw these into Photoshop just so I can maneuver around these a little easier. And again, I'm gonna use these water bottles as a reference point. Let's kind of frame things up that way. Let's take the 35mm extender shot and do something similar. Now, the first thing that I do notice right from the start is there's significant difference in contrast. The 35 millimeter, which is the one you're looking at right now, the contrast seems to be a little bit lighter. I can't put my finger on it, but it almost seems like there's a slight haze. Maybe that's just a byproduct of the contrast difference. Let's go in real tight. This is a 24 millimeter shot on the water bottles. So image quality wise, I'm not seeing a huge drastic difference other than just a simple change in contrast, which in my opinion is something that can be altered in Lightroom or Photoshop by just making a simple contrast adjustment, nothing too complicated. But yeah, as of now, I am not seeing any glaring major differences outside of contrast. I mean, clearly there's some pixelation difference, but that's because I'm zooming in where, you know, the water bottles were significantly smaller in frame on the 24 versus the 35. But yeah, I'm not seeing a chromatic aberration issue, but let's go off to the edges and let's see if there's anything there. Let's see if there's a softness issue. Maybe see if we can find something with some detail in the corner. Let's use this vent. That's on the 35. That's the 24. I mean, again, just some slight contrast differences between the two. I mean, maybe there's some subtle chromatic aberration. I see a slight purple line here in the second to the last vent here at the bottom. But now that I'm looking at the 24, I mean, it even seems to appear there slightly. When I brought these images into Lightroom, removing chromatic aberration was automatic. So, I mean, for the sake of video, to me, this is a real life example. This is what I would do, and I would think a lot of, you know, my fellow photographers would do too, is you just automatically have chromatic aberration as a factor that's removed. So if it was removed by Lightroom, so be it. That's what I would do on every single one in real life anyway. For me, when I import everything into Lightroom, it's automatic. So chromatic aberration, not really seeing an issue, not seeing a ton of softness, but we've got some other comparisons here. I know there was some texture here on the faucet. Let's compare that. Again, some slight contrast difference. There might be some people who are gonna, you know, yell and scream and say we're comparing apples and oranges here. But like I said, we've got two other comparisons we're gonna look at. Yeah, there's a little bit more detail on the 35, but that's to be expected. We're zoomed in at 35 versus 24. So my conclusion here, not seeing a drastic difference other than maybe a very slight and subtle contrast adjustment that may need to be done on the 35 millimeter. So the next comparison we're going to do is this 35 millimeter extender shot and compare it to a shot that was taken at roughly the same focal length on a Sigma 24-70. So the shot you're looking at right now is the 35 millimeter extender shot. And then this one is the Sigma lens. It's not shot exactly the same way, but it's pretty darn close. I think technically this was shot at 34. It's a zoom, so it's variable a little bit, so I didn't get it perfect, but I think I got it pretty darn close. Again, the first thing I noticed off the bat, there is quite a bit of contrast difference here, but let's zoom in. So let's go back to kind of this kitchen sink and get the faucet and the water bottles in frame. Let's do the same thing on the Sigma shot. Comparing these two, I'm not seeing a massive, just glaring in your face difference other than the contrast. Let's zoom in even further. Let's go back to the extender shot. Let's zoom in on these water bottles here. And let's do the same for the Sigma lens. I mean, wow. Look here at the bottom. If you can see this on the screen capture, we're at 500%. So keep that in mind as we're analyzing these photos. I'm not seeing a drastic change in softness. So here's my takeaway right now. First, not any huge, massive, in-your-face glaring differences. And number two, the differences that you are catching look like they could be made by simple adjustments in post, which most of us are doing some sort of post-production on our images anyway. So add this to your workflow to kind of compensate. My third comparison was going to be cropping in on this 24 millimeter shot and making it equivalent to the 35, but we've kind of already done that, zooming in and out. Now, before everyone blasts me in the comments, yes, I know this was one project, this was one shot, this was the 1.4. I know there's other extenders out there, so everything I'm saying cannot be taken as blanket statements for all extenders on the market. But in my opinion, this extender is not as bad as I think some photographers made it out to be. I actually think if you want to add some versatility to the toolbox that is your prime lenses, I'd say this is a great thing to have in your back pocket. Now, I do realize there are a ton of photographers who are way smarter than me out there. So if there was a comparison or something I missed in this video, let me know. I mean, I did purchase this. I'm more than happy to go out and maybe do more comparisons to kind of break this down even further. But yeah, from the start, I think it's a pretty good buy. I think it's pretty advantageous to have, but maybe there's something I'm missing. So again, if you have any feedback or thoughts or additional questions as it relates to this extender, let me know in the comments. I'll try to do my best to respond. Well, that will do it for this one. Feel free to follow me on Instagram at Matthew A Photo. If you made it all the way here to the end, as always, I sincerely appreciate taking the time to watch, and that'll do it for this video. We will see you on the next one.